There are some certainties in life that makes you feel good and secure, like Bandai Namco releasing the 99th anime game retelling the same story we already know over and over, and we still love it. Square Enix always bringing us some new Final Fantasy. EA and Activision with their usual annual releases. Konami that since 1987 has always given us a new Metal Gear made by Kojima. And Polyphony Digital will always bring us the next new Gran Turismo. But this wasn't always the case. There was a time when things weren't as straightforward as today. And even big companies like these ones that I just mentioned used to take many more risks, probably due to the video gaming business growing bigger than ever before. And along with it, also grew the risks in case of failures. This is probably why companies are less likely to take any chances today, especially with weird IPs. This means sadly that there is less space for experimentation. So let me tell you about a time when Polyphony Digital wasn't exclusively known for their Gran Turismo series. What else could they have possibly been known for, you say? Well, let's find out. Elation and jubilation, gamers from all around the world. I am Lucian and this is the World Gamer Show, and today we're going to count down the only 4 times that Kazunori Yamauchi and his team Polyphony Digital gave us non-Gran Turismo games. Of course, Polyphony Digital is synonymous with Gran Turismo, but also with PlayStation, since their games are all exclusive to Sony's consoles, hence all entries here will be on one of the consoles from the PlayStation family. Number 1. Motortoon Grand Prix, released in 1994 on PlayStation. This is the game that started it all, and of course couldn't be anything else but a driving game. But not the one you might expect. Instead of trying the realistic approach from the get-go, they did the right thing by first experimenting a little. Released only in Japan in 1994, just few weeks after the launch of the first PlayStation in December of that year, Motortoon Grand Prix was in fact a cartoon racing game. Almost like Mario Kart, but not quite like it. First, you didn't drive karts, but each contender would drive their own peculiar vehicle. One distinctive feature over Mario Kart, for example, is that each car was full of personality and a real reflection of the drivers. Not only that, but the graphics were hugely improved over Mario Kart, of course due to the better hardware. But I have to say that if Polyphony Digital, or rather Police as they were initially called, did half of the work that they did on Motortoon GP, I would have still been impressed. Instead, they went all out with super colorful graphics, fantastic handling of the cars, which was inspired by the classic handling of the RC cars, and the now infamous and trippy race courses you drive on. You can even play couch multiplayer in split screen, which is something that most of the early PS1 library didn't have. My favorite feature though is the way that cars sort of bend when turning. This feels totally like the most classic episodes of the Looney Tunes. And the fact that they got right so much so early in the PlayStation's life is a true testament to what they would go to achieve later on with their far more realistic Gran Turismo series. Number 2. Motortoon Grand Prix 2, released in 1996 on PlayStation. With the first installment failing to reach huge acclaim, having to face the supremacy, at the time at least, of
Ridge Racer! Remember that one?
Still selling enough copies to consider it a moderate success, Police tried again in 1996. Strong with the experience of the previous game, they decided to pack this new installment with more tracks, more characters and more unlockables than ever. Sony was much more confident with this one, so much so that they decided to bring this one outside of Japan, marking the first title from Police to reach NTSC and PAL regions. Keeping on with the tradition of the time, the second chapter came to the NTSC territories under the name of simply MotorToon Grand Prix, ditching the number 2, while Europe still got the Japanese title with the number 2 at the end. The core gameplay is still largely the same, but the content has been greatly increased and improved upon. The only downside is that, for some reason, they removed the split-screen multiplayer in favor of the abysmal link cable connection, for which you needed 2 PlayStation, 2 screens and 2 copies of the game. The Japanese version even came with a second disc dedicated solely to this feature. Anyway, at least they went all out with the unlockables. There are secret tracks, characters and even mini-games, including one that transforms the game into something of a precursor to the real driving simulator that will later become Gran Turismo. I'm speaking of MotorToon Grand Prix R. Look at this! I see some foreshadowing here. Number 3. Omega Boost, released in 1999 on PlayStation. Now we've come to my personal favorite on this list, also because it is the only non-driving game that Polyphony Digital ever developed, well, aside from the minigames in MotorToon GP2. So I can't help but praise their going out of their comfort zone with this one. This is a full 3D space mech combat simulator with huge focus on shooting. Yeah, you could also call it a shoot 'em up, but I find it extremely reductive. Being that we're speaking of Polyphony Digital and that Gran Turismo 1 on the PS1 looked as good as it did, and that this came after that, you can imagine that the graphics in Omega Boost are top-notch. Not only they are extremely detailed just like in the GTs for PS1, but they also have managed to maintain a steady frame rate of 60 FPS, which is pretty crazy considering that there is a lot going on the screen. The controls, while they might seem a little complicated at first, totally work and allow a fully satisfying handling of the mech. You can pull off many acrobatic moves and dodges, and also lock on multiple enemies, very much in the style of Panzer Dragoon. You could also see some resemblance with the later Zone of the Ender series on the PS2, minus the blade combat part. The game feels so modern for the time, while also being very anachronistic in some aspects. For example, the game still uses real actors in the FMV sequences, which is something I don't mind too much, because I love this kind of cheesiness. The only real downside I can find is that it falls a little short on longevity, also because Poly went for more of an arcade experience, which is kind of, again, anachronistic even for 1999. This means that you have a short experience that you ideally need to go through in one sitting, because even if you unlock the levels to be playable later on, this level selection doesn't actually allow you to move forward in the story. That's right, you basically can't save during the main campaign, and on top of that, continues are limited, and this is not an easy game. It totally feels like an arcade more than anything else, because it encourages mastery, just like in the old days. But I still wish there was a save feature also for the main story, and not just for replays and high scores. Maybe they could have left this arcade mode as an extra challenge for those who wanted more once the game is completed. Indeed, this feels to me more like a trick to hide the evident lack of content, and while I wish it was more a traditional experience for a home console, with a more classic story progression, where you can save in between missions, I still can't help but praise the work done here on the gameplay. This game might lack content, but what is there is simply sublime. Number 4. Tourist Trophy, released in 2006 on PlayStation 2. We finally reached the last non-GT game ever released by Polyphony, In what feels like the next step in a natural progression, this time they moved away from cars and turned to a different kind of vehicle, seeking to bring their realistic driving mechanics to the world of motorbikes. Coming after 2004's Gran Turismo 4, Tourist Trophy uses the same engine, meaning it is one of the few PS2 titles that can actually run at a whopping resolution of 1080i. Nothing short of amazing, but not that surprising considering that we're still speaking of Polyphony Digital. The handling of the bikes are as realistic as they could get on PS2, and not only the handling, also the look of them. Now there are some key differences from the GT series. The main game mode, creatively called the Tourist Trophy mode, has more of a linear progression as there are no money involved, so you don't really buy stuff like motorbikes or parts. This means that the satisfying part of actually taking a bad performing vehicle and tune it up to its maximum limits simply isn't here. You can still modify some aspects of your bike, but you won't really improve on it. Also, forget the MotoGP experience with like 20 other bikes. Here you can only run against 3 other opponents, so you won't really get that adrenaline feel that you might find on other bike racers. That aside, again, the bikes control like a dream, and the graphics are as good as GT4, which is saying a lot. Another drawback is that the selection of bikes is hugely reduced compared to the hundreds of cars in GT. Here you can get just a little over 100 motorbikes, but they are all uniquely and realistically defined. So even though there isn't as much content as the GT series in here, the core philosophy is still the same, to provide a realistic, or as realistic as possible on the PS2, motorbike simulation. And this is why this game has been pretty much summarized as Gran Turismo for bike lovers, and I couldn't possibly put it in a better way. As a side note, Kazunori Yamauchi claimed that he's aware that this game has its fair share of fans, and that a sequel is always in the back of his mind, so who knows, we might eventually get it one day. So there you have it, the only 4 titles developed by Polyphony Digital that are not Gran Turismo games. Did you play any of these? Maybe at the time of their releases or later on? Were you even aware of their existence? Which one do you think is most deserving of a sequel or a reboot of any sort? Share your thoughts in the comment section down below, I'll be sure to read each and every comment. Also, if you like the video, feel free to subscribe, like and share it with your friends, this really helps me. I'll be seeing you in my future video, but until then, play safe, stay safe, world gamers.